Hi guys, and welcome to my channel. In today's video I'm going to show you how I painted this pink peony. This flower has been requested so many times and I thought I'll show you guys how I go about layering the watercolors and show you which pigments I use. For those of you who are new to this channel, hi, my name is Anna. I'm a Canadian money designer, professional illustrator, and I love teaching watercolor. All supplies are listed in the video description below. You can also find the reference photo and use it for your own practice. Feel free to download it and definitely tag me on Instagram or Facebook if you end up sharing your work. I love seeing your projects. If you like the video, don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell below so you know when I post my next one. Before we get started, just a quick note to my longtime followers. I apologize for being away for quite some time. I kind of had a rough time finding an opportunity to record during this lockdown, and frankly I kind of struggled with the whole stress of it. I'm sure I'm not the only one, but I'm really happy to be back to my normal schedule, so I'll now be releasing the videos that I worked on over the past couple of weeks. I hope everyone is safe and well during this time, and hopefully you have some time for your creative outlet. It's really important to keep that going, especially during times of stress, as I've learned myself. So thank you for your patience. Now let's get started. So let's get right into it, and I will show you which brushes I used. I have a Real Sable Reserva from Escoda, and I use it for larger washes, and I also use the Escoda Versatile, which is a synthetic sable, for my initial big wet on wet wash, and also for some very fine details. So these are travel format synthetic brushes, and that's where you see the metal handle. If you want to see a full review of these brushes, I'll link the videos below. And in terms of the colors, I'm using a mixture of Daniel Smith watercolors and QOR watercolors that are made by Golden. For my background layer, I'm using a lot of quinacridone red, some opera pink, even though it's a fugitive color, it's a lovely, lovely color. And Bordeaux is my secret weapon here. I also have quinacridone violet and dioxazine purple, a bit of blue. For the highlights, the sunspots, I'm using the yellow from QOR and some Hansa Yellow Deep from Daniel Smith. I'm also going to do those brownish shadows with quinacridone burnt orange. I'm also using some coral color, but not a lot. It's not really necessary here. And for those deep shadows towards the end in the last layer, I'm going to use Perylene Violet and Perylene Maroon. So let's take it to the table. I have an outline already, and I covered the yellow stamens in the middle with some masking fluid. I also have some thin masking fluid outlines on the edges of the petals, so this will be really helpful, so I don't have to worry about covering my highlights or the yellow parts, and I can just go ahead and make the entire area of the flower wet and start putting my red and pink colors, a little bit of blue on the edges. After the first couple of layers are dry, I will remove the masking fluid and put down some yellow color on those stamens. I'll probably leave most of the petal edges white just to show those highlights, and it will help me separate different petals visually. So I'm just going to go over the entire flower, and you can see me sort of putting cooler blues and purples towards the edge and much warmer colors towards the middle, and this is just sort of following the direction of light. And there's some petals that really get a lot of sunlight and some that are sort of in the shadow, but as a general rule of thumb, I'm going to try to keep the ones in the back and the edges of the petal more cool with blues and purples. And yeah, I'm using quite a bit of opera pink, which is a fugitive color, but it's really helping me kind of add a bit of a color boost here. I know it's going to fade eventually, but I'm going to scan this work so it's going to be preserved in its original state in the digital version. Start with the next step, which I call a definition layer. Essentially, I waited until the first layer was completely dry, and now I'm going to add a bit more saturated layers on top of the first layer. And the key here is I'm just going to look for deep shadow areas, define those. In the highlight areas, I'm going to boost those yellows a little bit, add a bit more pink, and just continue with some smaller details. So a couple of key principles here. I am looking at the reference photo, but I'm also very mindful of the direction of light. So I'm not just blindly following the reference. I'm trying to sort of follow that rule that I talked about in the beginning, where I keep my shadows quite warm in the center, because there's going to be a lot of reflection from the yellow stamens and also from surrounding petals. And I'm keeping my petals that are in the back and also the edges of the petals quite more cool. So I'm using a lot of Bordeaux. You can use magenta if you don't have Bordeaux. Also adding just a bit of violet and purple, so warmer in the middle, cooler on the outside. And I'm trying to keep my details for the petals that are closer to me, and this is just to help me keep those petals closer visually. In my photo I can see all the details, but I'm going to keep my background petals without much detail, without much definition. Okay, now that I'm done with this layer, I'm gonna let it dry, and in real time it was probably about 24 hours, but I typically recommend about 2 hours at least before you start removing the masking fluid, just so that you don't pick up any color underneath or disturb the paper layer underneath. So I'm going to remove this masking fluid with a thin eraser and reveal the white parts. And then of course I'm going to cover them with some warm yellow, and then follow up with a bit of quinacridone burnt orange and possibly some perylene maroon. My accent layer is going to be all about boosting the colors and adding a lot more definitions to the petals. So I'm gonna look very closely at the reference photo and try to define those grooves and the texture on the petals. I'm using a lot more saturated color and slowly going from my Bordeaux and my quinacridone red to deeper colors, and I'm going to use a lot more perylene violet and perylene maroon here. theoretically say that this is complete, but I'm just gonna go on and just add more strokes. Again, one of the key principles I mentioned is keeping the petals that are closer to you a bit more detailed. So I'm gonna spend some time here and just keep defining those shadows over and over again until I'm satisfied with the way it looks. I'm also going to fix a few mistakes. My masking fluid was a bit too thick in certain places, so I'm just gonna go over with my brush and make sure that it all makes sense and I didn't leave any large white areas that feel out of place. So I feel like this is pretty much done. I'm quite happy with how it turned out. I spent quite a bit of time looking at my reference photo, but I also took some liberties with my colors just to make sure that as a standalone painting, this looks cohesive in terms of the color and makes sense in terms of the direction of light. So I'm quite happy with my light and shadow. I'm quite happy with the level of detail. I'm just gonna sign, and I'll make this available as a print in my Redbubble shop. I hope you enjoyed this demo, and again, I apologize for being away for quite some time. If you have any questions, just leave a comment below. I'll slowly be getting back to regularly answering everyone who has comments or questions. And thank you so much for your support, guys. Have a wonderful week, and I'll see you next weekend.